University, head of black studies out there, one of the leading psychologists in the nation, former president, National Association of Black Psychologists, our speaker for tonight, our griot, our hero, Dr. Wade Nobles. Let's give it up for Dr. Wade Nobles. Okay, go ahead. One more time, Dr. Wade Nobles. Let him know.
Hotep, brothers and sisters. You know I was going to be here. There was no question I wasn't going to make it. And I had discussed this with my beautiful queen, Dr. Rosin Jeffrey, sitting here. And she said, don't come too close to time because we've got to let our brother, attorney at war, Alton Maddox, take care of business before we get started. And our attorney at war, Dr. Alton Maddox, is supposed to be getting me a watch, but he doesn't know it wouldn't do no good. But it would be good to have one. I might be able to pawn it when things get rough. But I'm glad to see all of you here. I missed Dr. Finch last week, but of course I was here the week before that, and you're in for a special treat tonight. Let's give our brother, our attorney at war, and his family, let's give them an acknowledgement for bringing us week after week after week these outstanding brothers and sisters. You don't know how powerful an education you are getting when our people come together. Because when you're in this setting, it releases you from the fetters that are designed to control your spirit. When I walk into a classroom at City College, I know I'm going into a prison cell. I know everything I'm saying is being taped and monitored. I know some of those beautiful black students sitting in front of me are there in order to monitor everything I say. So you know that you're in a controlled mechanism. But when you come to African family affairs like the slave theater, then there's a whole nother process that takes place. There's a whole release of the spirit, and I'm sure Dr. Finch felt it when he was here. My wife was all excited about the brother. Now tonight you're in for a special treat. If you know, and you do know, and you've experienced, and you have experienced, a hellraiser on the East Coast, and his base is up there at City College, and he's been raising issues, and he's been fighting for the community, and he's been traveling the highways and byways of the African world, and he's been releasing this power and knowledge. If you know there's a hellraiser up there on that hill in Harlem, on the East Coast, you've got to know that there is a brother on the West Coast who is a hellraiser. He's got a fighting spirit. He's got all the credentials that the white boy says you've got to have. You know, when I talk about my $1 million white boy education at this polarity, but then the thing that makes me me and allows me to travel the highways and byways of the African world to bring a message of strength and empowerment to you, the thing that makes me me is my multi-billion-dollar African education that began in the mind of my mother as she conceived greatness for her youngsters. And you've got to understand that this is my counterweight, my counterpart on the West Coast. If there's nobody else in terms of a scholar of my generation that's around and that's supporting me, I know that this brother is in the same spirit that I am in. He's got degrees from the best of the institutions that the white boy has. Stanford University, you can't get no better than that. You know, just like Columbia University, you can't get no better than that. So Dr. J and Dr. Wade got their degrees from these white institutions, which shows that we knew how to go into their institutions, master their knowledge, and come out with their piece of paper. But that does not make us the scholar warriors that we are. There's another level of our engagement with spirit, with knowledge, with mission that makes us what we are. And you have to see this brother's work to appreciate it. You have to see his work in Oakland, California. Oakland, California is like Bedford-Stuyvesant. Oakland, California is like where I grew up, North New Jersey. Oakland, California is a very black community. Oakland, California is plagued with all of the problems that black communities are supposed to be plagued with that are in an urban setting where the white communities have dumped their problems on us. And where does Dr. Wade Nobles decide to do his work? Where he is really working with the community and setting up his Institute of Black Family Life. Not up in the mountains in Berkeley and Oakland. He's down in the valley. He's right in the community. The brother is serious about his work. So at one side, he had the Black Family Life, and there are a number of publications and whatnot that come out of the Black Family Life that we need to sign up for and have him send them to us, or maybe next week he can ship some of the material back to the East Coast, and they'll be available next week for you. But they have produced a number of publications dealing with African centricity and African centeredness and the African family that Dr. Wade and his staff have been the major producers of. Slipping into the auditorium at the Slave Theater is the warrior partner of Dr. Jeffries, Professor Small. How could you let him slip in without acknowledging the brother? And I think he came in with some of his tapes and other things that he was not able to take care of in Detroit, so he has them for you here tonight. So you can go back home with a bit of Dr. Nobles, and of course you then got the full blast of our attorney at war, and you can get Brother Smalls as well. But the brother has also taken the lead, Dr. Nobles, in charting an Africanized course for our national organizations. When he became the head of the black psychologists, he got them involved in Africanizing. And in fact, his installment as the president was an African installment ceremony. The brother himself, although his base is on the West Coast, his family institute, and his home is not up in the hills, but his home with his beautiful wife and his children, his home is in the black community in Oakland. And that's another part of the brother that's not seen. See, you can't see all these things when you see these African robes and these kufis. You've got to see another sense of strength. And when you see the family that him and his wife have invested in, these youngsters, these children, then you know where the brother's heart is. He made up his mind, and his wife made up her mind, that as the children graduated from high school, their gift from the family would be a trip to the homeland of African peoples in the Nile Valley. That's what the brothers is all about. Children achieve and they get recognized, and then they're immersed in deep water. Once you are in the deep waters of the Nile, you're never the same. And so he knows what he's doing in terms of laying down a path for his children. His wife is a special spirit. You can't see these robes don't tell you what you got next to you in terms of a partner. Just as you see me with my little flowing robes and my kufi, but you don't know the spiritual strength that I have with my wife, Dr. Rosalind Jeffries. You don't know what it means to have a wife that can be with you in the struggle, knowing that you are out there possibly being attacked or killed, but they're still there supporting you. The attorney at war's got the same situation with his beautiful Queen Leola, and let's acknowledge her too while we're acknowledging it. And there she goes. Don't want you all to deal with her, but there she goes. Brother could not be as strong as he could be if he did not have Leola. And the brother could not be as strong as he is if he did not have his wife, Vera. The wife was suffering from a crippling disease. That did not stop her. She just pursued her development even further, went on to Philadelphia in wheelchair, and got a PhD from Alefi Asante's African-centered program. That's his wife. And when she was crippled by the disease, that meant that the brother had to become more than the international scholar, more than a community man in working in his Oakland community, more than one of the leaders of the melanin movement. The brother had to become father and mother to grown children in a community that's being devastated. And what did he do? He became that. He assumed greater roles and responsibilities. And I'm going to tell a story that lifted me up. When I went out to Oakland and his wife was there, and after my wife and I met them, and we had to run out to the airport, Vera said she was going too. So I thought it meant she was going to the door to see us off. But no, Vera meant she was going to the airport to see us off like you would normally do. So she got the wheelchair, rolled out of her house, crossed the street, and I can still remember as if it was yesterday. The brother takes wife up in his powerful arms and puts her right up in the front seat of car, and then gets the wheelchair together, and then we drive out to the airport. You got to understand the strength that you see here in terms of African power, spirituality, mastery, trying to achieve perfectibility. And even though he's tied to his community, and even though he's at San Francisco State in the Black Studies Department, he's dealing with the continent. He's trying to master those traditional systems that have been such a mystery to us. And he'll be going to the continent, he told me, in July or so, and he'll be there for a month doing some serious work. He never quite tells me what he's doing, but I know he's doing some serious work. Just like Brother Small never tells me quite what he's doing, but they're doing some serious work on a traditional side of the ledger that most of us don't know anything about. But you have to understand that we have to master that traditional side as well as the modern technological side, to have that balance. Because we've got to be able to deal with Ma'at, which is the spiritual development of African peoples through time, which was synthesized and reached the zenith in the Nile Valley. But you've got to deal with the Maafa, the devastation, the stripping of African peoples of their humanity, which our sister Marimba Ani talks about in her book, Urugu. So you've got to see Ma'at at work as a power source for our people, but you have to see Maafa as a devastation that we've got to deal with. So you've got to neutralize the death as you build on the life processes. And this brother understands that as well as any of us around on planet Earth in terms of African consciousness. So we're really blessed to have him with us. He also has a partner, one of his teachers, Dr. Nathan Hare. And once I made a speech with Dr. Hare in California, and I made a strong statement about Dr. Wade Nobles, my partner, made us clear understanding and analysis when he said, power is the ability to define reality and have other people respond to your definition as if it were their own. That has gone across the international airways. But the teacher of my brother told me, well, Dr. J, that's all very nice. But you know where Wade first heard that type of definition? I gave it to him. So I was glad to hear that. To see, because Dr. Nathan Hare is one of those scholar warriors in the struggle in the 60s in black studies, and with his wife, Dr. Julia Hare. They've traveled the byways and highways to show that a team of Dr. Hare, man, and a Dr. Hare, woman, could raise the African consciousness as they do it. And they've developed what they call the Black Think Tank out there on the West Coast. So what I'm trying to say, brothers and sisters, we are on a triumphant march. This brother is a part of that, holding up that West Coast and holding up that African understanding, holding up that field of psychology where he and Nayim Akbar and others are major players. So we're blessed to have him here, and I just want to be able to say, I wish I had maintained contact with him over the last few weeks so that we could have seen each other, and I could have made it possible, if he wasn't there, to get to the Million Man Watch. Because if there's any brother I would have wanted to have shared that moment with, outside of my brother Jeff and my brother James Small, it is Brother Wade Nobles. Because when you looked out across that mall in Washington and you saw 1 million+ black men standing in the shadow of the Washington Memorial, and you could look beyond the Washington Memorial and see the Lincoln Memorial behind it, a pillar temple, then you knew that this sacred ground that white folks had created to represent their rise to power had now been taken over by black men. And that black men were declaring to the world that there is a rise of black men around black consciousness that's going to shake the world. And you could see it, you could feel it. When Minister Farrakhan raised Akhenaten, you could actually stand on the platform, as I did with 100+ other people, and look out, and you could see the sun that he was referencing around Akhenaten, and you could see the solar rays of the sun over the 1 million+ black men. You got to understand the spirituality that was created in that sacred space. And when the brother was declaring to the world, the power brokers of the world that are in all of these secret societies, that black men have come to create a brotherhood of spirit, the likes of which the world has never seen. And you have to understand that that's where we are. We're in a rise, getting prepared for the 21st century. I was hoping that our attorney at war and our scholar warrior, Dr. Nobles, would be with me on Saturday when I fly off to commune with the spirit of Zumbi of Palmares in Brazil. But Wade said, well, you didn't tell me about it. And Alton would say, well, damn, you should have told me about it. And Clemson Brown said, damn, I will bring the camera, but you didn't tell me about it. We've been so busy, we ain't been communicating on all 4s and 5s like we should be. But we will be leaving a group of us to represent you as we meet to celebrate the 300th anniversary of the heroic struggle of African peoples in Brazil that was symbolized by the last fight and resistance of Zumbi of Palmares, the leader. And when I come back, I'll be fired up from the Zumbi experience, fired up from the Million Man March, fired up from the Pan-African Conference in England, fired up from going to Trinidad and being the counterweight with Brother Smalls with the Dalai Lama. We're on a rise, brothers and sisters, of spiritual power, the likes of which no other black people have seen, and we need it now.
All right.
So the brother will be with us tonight and commune and lay down his message. I'll be in the back. Those of you who want to contact me, I'll be there. We got a little bit of something that you can also go home with. We got the petition to the Supreme Court that was given to Sambo Thomas, and it's now a historical document. If I sign it, it's even more of a historical document, so that we still got some legal bills to pay, and we'll be in the back so you can help us out with that. But let's give an African rise, an acknowledgement of enormous brotherhood and friendship, African familyhood, to Dr. Wade Nobles, Scholar Warrior Supreme.
I want to first break a tradition and just let Leonard know that as I sat on the mall, I knew he was there. Even though I didn't see him, I had my 2 sons and their 2 sons. And so I had 2 grandsons, 2-year-old boys. And the most important thing that happened personally was as my 2-year-old grandsons fell asleep and we laid them out on the ground, black men would walk by and they would say, look out, don't step on them new black men. See, they said these are new black men. And while they were speaking to these 2 babies on the ground, the fact of the matter is that they had labeled the icon. The icon of the day was that 1.5 became new black men. And we need to understand that significance and make sure it does not die. Because it can die if we allow them to redefine it. And I want to speak a little bit about that. But before I do, I have a responsibility to ask you all to allow me to assume a posture of reverence and respect while I give praise and credit to the source of all knowledge. And I do that by saying out loud that the Almighty, who is sometimes called Amun, and is sometimes called Aset, and is sometimes called Ptah, and is sometimes called Sheshat, and is sometimes called Jehovah, and is sometimes called the Christ, and is sometimes called Oshun, and is sometimes called Shango, and is sometimes called Allah, and is sometimes called Oya, and is sometimes called Olutumari, and is sometimes called Atum, that Almighty God, Amun, Ptah, Ra, although hidden, is the source of all knowledge, all truth, and all wisdom. And I pray in what I share with you this evening that Amun, Tehuti, Orumila will be satisfied. It is our tradition as African people that whenever one comes and is invited to the village of family, even though you are family, one must introduce themselves. One must state, what is your purpose? Why are you here? Who are you? And I must tell you that Africa has taught me that one's name represents one's nature. So please allow me to introduce myself and tell you my name. My mother and father named me Wade Nobles. Wade is a word that means to tread through difficult matter, like mud, snow, or ignorance. The Wade treads through the difficult matter. Nobles is a word that means the nature of dignity, high quality and esteemed character. I am a devotee of Ifa. I am a child of Orumila. Orumila is the god of wisdom and intelligence, and Orumila named me Ifak Bami. Ifa blesses me. The spirit blesses me. I am a child of Shango, the god of war and thunder. And Shango named me Shango Dari. Shango protects me. Oruku Mini Ifa Bami Shango Dari. My name is Ifa blesses me, and Shango protects me. Oruku Mini Waid Nabila. My name is the noble one. Oruku Mini Kwaku Menza. My name is Wednesday born third son of a third son. Oruku Mini Wade Nobles. My name is one who struggles through difficult matter with dignity, high intelligence, and the quality of character. I bring you greetings from the Department of Black Studies, the College of Ethnic Studies of San Francisco State, the Institute for the Advanced Study of Black Family Life and Culture, and the National Association of Black Psychologists. My name is my nature. Our name is our nature. And I want to talk with you, to think out loud in front of you about the importance of words. The importance of words. We need to take them seriously. We need to understand the power of the word, the nomo. We need to understand and think deeply about that. In fact, if one were to talk about the two defining characteristics of the African way, it would be a people who believe in high culture and deep thought. High culture and deep thought. So let me label or define my remarks, and I've entitled them for this evening, From Sankofa to Enyimyam, illuminating the spirit of the African history maker. Too often we talk about our history, and we talk about it almost like children playing the dozens. My mama did something better than your mama. My dad did something better than your daddy. But we never do the analysis that allow us to understand what was the nature of the people who made that history. And we must understand that nature if we are to reclaim and to expand that history. Part of our difficulty, part of why we have nothing, is because we lost sight of the nature that compelled us to greatness. From Sankofa to Enyimyam. It is true that I almost never make remarks without saying the definition of power because I want to remind us all the time that that's where real power lies. It is a psychological question. It's not a military question. It's not an economic question. It's not a social question. It is a psychological question. Power is the ability to define reality and to have other people respond to your definition as if it were their own. Our dilemma, our problem, is that we allowed other people to define the meaning of who we are. And once we accepted their definition, we gave them power. And they relish that power because they can simply send us on simple errands, like selling drugs in our community, like not taking care of our families, like disrespecting each other, and we believe that's our nature. We begin to act as if that's our nature. Power is the ability to define reality and to have other people respond to your definition as if it were their own. And the most important reality to define is the meaning of one's human beingness. That's nobody's conversation but ours. We can't even allow them to enter in the possibility of engaging in conjecture. They can't even wonder about what it means to be African people unless you're African. That's no one's business but ours. You see, I believe it is the struggle for the authorship of what it means to be African as human beings that is the moral imperative of the black psychologists. We need to recognize that we have a historical mission. And our historical mission is to help through analyses, to help with our interpretation of the spirit, our people to understand what it is to be a human being. What it is to be a human being. And I believe that psychologists, we as psychologists, have failed in that response. We failed because we did not recognize that while we spent a lot of energy trying to make Freud hip, or we spent a lot of energy trying to give Young some talk like black folk, while we did a lot of energy taking whatever the psychologists that are the founding fathers of Western psychology and make them black, that's not struggling with the question of humanity. That's simply creating the Frankensteins of the world. And we obey Dr. Frankenstein once we've been created by Frankenstein. The mental liberation of African people is dependent on our ability to assist in the reconceptualization and the reconstruction of African reality. We have to think about how we even talk about Africa, how we even conceive of this notion of being an African. See, it is not, as Dr. J said, it's not just wearing African clothes. African clothes are good to wear, but it's not just wearing African clothes. You can put African clothes on a dog. That doesn't make the dog an African. See, so we have to begin to understand that it is the mental liberation of our people that is necessary. We can't have that mental liberation if we don't engage in the reconceptualization and the reconstruction of African reality independent of white conceptualizations. Independent of white conceptualizations. Too often our upbringing, because we're brought to be polite people, too often our upbringing compels us to want to invite them into the conversation. What do white folks think about that? I wonder what they think about that. Do white psychologists understand that? See, we want to be polite, but when it's a question of one's essential humanity, we can't be polite. We have to be selfish. We have to begin to talk about understanding that. Nelson Mandela, in his presidential address, said a lot of things, some that didn't make sense because he was offering these, what do they call those things, those leaves? What are those, the peace leaf? Olive branch, thank you, brother. He was doing a lot of olive branch waving, but one of the things he said in his presidential address that I want to share with you because I want us to think deeply about it. Remember, Africans are high culture and deep thought. And what Nelson said was, our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is not that we are inferior. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. Our deepest fear is that it is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. We ask ourselves, who am I to be? Brilliant, gorgeous, talented, or fabulous? You are a child of God. You're playing, and this is important, you're playing small doesn't serve the world. There's nothing enlightened about shrinking so that other people won't feel insecure around you. We do it all the time. We do it all the time. We shrink our glory to make them feel comfortable. We are a polite people. You know, we shrink. Nelson goes on to say, it is not just in some of us, it is in everyone. And as we let our own light shine, we unconsciously give other people permission to do the same. As we are liberated from our own fear, our presence automatically liberates others. When you stand up as a black man, other black men get liberated. When you stand up as a black woman, other black women get liberated. As we are liberated from our own fear, our presence automatically liberates others. Well, what are we afraid of? That seems to be the question. What are we afraid of? We are afraid to be. Period. Period. And as Asa Hilliard says, he raises the proverbial Shakespearean question. Shakespeare asked the question, to be or not to be? That is the question. Asa took that from Shakespeare and made it more profound and immortal. Asa says, to be African or not to be? That is the question. You have no choice. You have no choice. Either you are African or you don't exist as a human being. Now, you can exist as a robot, you can exist as Frankenstein, you can exist as a rabid dog. But if you are not African, you can't be. So we have to struggle with this now. Okay, we got the framework here now, right? What's that? High culture, deep thought. We know the high culture because that's the stuff we do during February. You know, we can talk about the cultural rituals and stuff. We can play around with that. But it's the deep thought that we sometimes don't engage in. We don't engage in the deep thought, but let's try to work through some of that this evening. I'm suggesting in my own writing and thinking now that there's really a triangle that one needs to look at in terms of laws. And I'm calling these the triangle of knowing, being, and doing. The triangle of knowing, being, and doing for Africans living in a non-African reality. That's a dilemma right there. Africans living in a non-African reality. What do we know? How do we be? What do we do? Those are questions that are critical. Brother Max was talking about earlier about the idea, why don't we have a place? That's a doing thing, but it's also tied to a knowing thing and a being thing. What is the problem? The problem, I believe, is in law. See, one of the things that Stanford University did for me, Dr. J, it did for you as well, is that it let us realize, because they didn't take us seriously, to let us realize that part of scholarship is that I have the power to declare law. I can make a law. And as a psychologist, I can make a law about your humanity. That's some powerful stuff. Psychologists all the time, they say based upon your behavior, the law says you are schizophrenic, lock them up. Based upon your behavior, my law says you are paranoid, lock you up. The law says based upon your behavior, based upon something I see, or based upon not understanding your communion with your orisha or with your spirit, you are seeing things that are not there, therefore you must be insane, lock them up. So I'm a lawmaker as a psychologist. I'm a lawmaker. And so the first law I made was the law of misknowing. Hear me. The law of misknowing. This law says, not knowing but misknowing. This law says, if you don't understand white supremacy, everything else you think you know will simply confuse you. That's a law. It's a law. If you don't understand white supremacy, everything else you think you know will simply confuse you. If I don't understand white supremacy, everything I know about psychology confuses me. If I don't understand white supremacy, everything I know about the law will simply confuse you. If I don't understand white supremacy, riding and driving a bus will simply confuse me, because I will not understand what is the source of the issue that those spirits coming onto that bus mean to me. Second law says is the law of non-being. The law of non-being. Remember, this is a triangle of knowing, being, and doing. The law of non-being says, if you don't exist according to your African essence, everything you are will be a diminishment. Hear it again. If you don't exist according to your African essence, according to your African nature, according to your African spirit, then everything you are, or that you think you are, will be a diminishment. I am the Supreme Court judge, black person in the seat. But if I don't do that as an African, then being the judge in the highest office of the land is a diminishment. It makes me less. It makes me less. And we have to understand that because we have a responsibility for raising up our children, and sometimes we counsel them to be all that you can be, but we never tell them to be African. And so they become all that they can be, but that's a diminishment. That's a lessening. And we need to understand these laws. And the third law is the law of undoing. The law of undoing. The law of undoing says the experiences of one generation become the history of the next generation, and the history of several generations becomes the traditions of a people. We've had several generations of us thinking that we are not African, and that has become our negative tradition. We have to understand, though, that the law says the experience of one generation becomes the history of the next generation. Then we can start a tradition in this generation. We can start a tradition simply by passing what we do on to the next generation as their history. And if we do that and they pass on to the next generation, it becomes our tradition. So this stuff this problem that we have is not, it can be solved. It can be solved based upon us understanding our knowing, our being, and our doing, and consciously working with those. Consciously understanding those. From Sankofa to Enyimyam. Why is Sankofa important? Sankofa is important not because we've sort of reclaimed it and said, oh, we got this nice little bird that's walking forward and looking backwards, and that's something from out of West Africa, but it is deep thought. Deep thought we have to approach everything with. The Sankofa is a traditional West African icon of a bird, that is true. And the bird is walking forward and is looking backward. And most Ghanaians will tell you that the meaning of the Sankofa is that one must go back and fetch in order to go forward. One must go back and fetch in order to go forward. The Sankofa signifies the ability to utilize one's historical past and traditions in order to go forward in the future. That makes sense. Black folks say, okay, I understand that. Let me go back, get some African stuff, and maybe I can go forward into the future. But it is deeper than that. The head of the Sankofa bird has an egg in its mouth. Let me think about this now. We got this bird looking backwards, walking forward with an egg in its mouth. So we have to reconceptualize. Remember I said we have to reconceptualize our Africanness independent of European conceptualizations. Europeans say, well, maybe the bird was hungry. He got an egg. It's going to, maybe it's transporting its children. We don't know what that is. But the African tells us that the egg represents life's substance. The egg represents the essence of life. Now, the Sankofa becomes one must go back and fetch one's essence in order to go forward into the future. It's not just going back and finding out how did brothers handle having more than one wife, or how do they build houses, or how do they judge people in terms of jurisprudence. The Sankofa bird is the Sankofa really means one has to go back and fetch one's essence in order to go forward. One must use one's original essence in order to correct and not to repeat the errors that we make every single day. So it's this essence that becomes the critical thing. It is the essence or the spirit. I want to use essence, spirit, power, force, energy as interchangeable. All right? Essence, spirit, power, force, energy as interchangeable. And so when you look at this question of Sankofa, one has to go back. We as African people must go back to fetch our spirit to understand. We're not going back. I know you all don't hear me saying, go back and pick up your spirit. And I'm talking about understand that the spirit is in you, but you got to go back in you to understand this spirit to go forward in terms of the future. How do you do that? How do you do that is how we think. It's not, you're not going to go to Africa with Dr. J or anyone else who's taking people to Africa and find this thing on the ground and pick it up and bring it back to the United States. Even though you may get some experiences that you are transformed in, there's no object. The spirit is in you that you have to understand, and it is how you think. That requires us to look at, how do Africans think? How do Africans think? Remember, independent of Western conceptualizations. The African think, the question of answering how do African thinks require us to raise the issue of something that we don't like to talk about sometimes because it gets to be sort of that intellectualizing, but it's an important concept. The concept is epistemology. Epistemology, the study of reality and how you know it's real. That's all it is. Epistemology is the study of reality and how you know it's real. What makes stuff real? The African says the universe is cosmos. It is cosmos, not condition. And I don't want to do a lot of comparisons to white folks, but sometimes you got to do that to help understand. But the European says that the universe is a condition, and there are all these independent, separate elements in the condition that have, at best, some contractual relationship. Let me break this down. If I'm independent and separate from my wife, I have to have a contract to connect to her. Sometimes it's called a marriage license. White folks even go even further, and they have prenuptial contracts because they automatically say, we are independent, separate. I know it's not going to last, so I better protect my shit in case it falls apart. And so they have a prenuptial arrangement. But see, that's based upon a epistemological conception. The meaning of reality is that we have nothing in common. The African says that the universe is cosmos, meaning that everything is of the same essence. Everything is of the same egg. Everything is in the same egg. And the ultimate reality in the African epistemology is that the ultimate nature of reality is spirit. Sometimes the writers will say spiritual, but you got to be careful. And I hope before I finish, I will maybe make some clarification on this notion of spirituality versus spirit. The ultimate nature of reality is spirit. The African proverb says, if it exists, it most assuredly is spirit. If it exists, it is spirit. So the question is, how do I ignite the spirit? Our mothers and fathers did it all the time. They would do it by reading you. They would do it by understanding what inspires you. We would never raise our children to achieve greatness through domination. It was always not domination and manipulation. It was always through inspiration. Inspiration is what? To what? Inspire, to energize, to create the energy, the volition that makes it go forward. The African epistemology also talks about human beings being organically connected to everything in the universe. That's why folk could begin to see things in the universe and understand what was their power. Old people go out in the backyard and look at a lamp, cut some of those off and boil them up and give that baby. He'll feel better tomorrow. Just being able to look at the plant and see what its power was, seeing what its essence was. And then we got white folks running over to Africa now trying to snap pictures of the leaves and take the leaves back and going back to the laboratory and trying to analyze it, make medicine to sell back to Africa. And Africa now is buying little bottles of medicine based upon the stuff that was going in their backyard. If you don't understand, you don't exist according to your African essence, everything else you think you are will be a diminishment. We got Africans in Africa warring about whether traditional healers are backward and the London, Frankfurt, and France trained physicians are in fact superior. If you don't exist according to your African essence, everything else you think you are will simply, if you don't understand white supremacy, everything else you think you know will simply confuse you. Sankofa becomes important. The African epistemology suggests that it is the mode and the method of experience that we have to understand. Part of our problem is that our methodology for unity is off because we don't understand our nature. And so we think that we can just get black folk together and say, because you black, you should do something together. That don't make sense. That's like saying, taking a box of crayons and saying, because you all got color, you should draw a picture. See, the crayons can't draw a picture. The crayons have to have what? A God to make them draw the picture. So black folk can't do nothing together just because we black. We must have the energy, the spirit that allows us to do it, and that's that egg in the Sankofa. The African says we understand our experience through participation. not through just sort of intellectual analysis, but through participation, is when I engage with a brother, when I engage with a sister, that I learn something. I can talk all I want about, I know somebody, but it's only when we connect that I know. Like, I know this brother here. I know him not because we've had these long conversations, and we've had long conversations, but because we've connected. Our spirits are one, and we recognize that, so I can read his mind, and he can read my mind. And so that has to do with this Afrocentric epistemology, that it is cosmos, that there's a balance between our rational thought and our intuition. There's a balance between analysis and synthesis. There's a balance between the known and the unknown. There's a balance between the invisible and the visible. And what we see too much is just the visible and not recognize that the invisible is a critical component. It is this African understanding that we have to keep struggling for. Africa teaches me that you focus on the person, not the individual. All right. We run around talking about individuals. In fact, we get concerned if someone questions my right to be an individual, and that we even reward each other based upon individual accomplishments that distinguish us from others of us. Africa says that it is the person, because the person is the container and the instrument of divine energy. I'm the container, if I can use the symbolism of God. I am the container of God. At the same time, I am the instrument of God. All right. I am the container of the Spirit, and at the same time, I'm the instrument of the Spirit. So it's not enough just to be the container. I have to do both. It's not enough for us as Africans to say, well, we Africans, we got the Spirit. You got to do something with the Spirit. You got to build a nation. That people build nations if they have spirits. They build nations to protect who they are in terms of their identity. So we can't just come together and say, yeah, we got the Spirit. The Spirit is good. And we Africans. No, you got to do something with the Spirit. And according to the African says the person is to be a person is to be human, and to be human is to be divine. All right. The human being is perceived by the Bantu Congo, for instance, as a power. When a child is born, it is a power that is born. The Congo people say that a birth of a child is perceived as the rising of a living son. A rising of a living son into the upper world. So the human being is a rising of a living son. We are all sons, S-U-N sons. We are all sons rising, meaning that we have to go somewhere. You see the deep thinking in this sort of philosophical, epistemological notions, that just conceptualizing the person as divine and the person as a rising sun, that it tells us that when you come to this world, you got to do something. But what you got to do is to what? To rise, to ascend, to make it more better. You're not just here to be here. You're not here just to be here. The person is a living son, and the living son possesses a knowing, and this part intrigues me. The Congo people say the human being, to be a human, is to be a person who is a living son possessing a knowing and a knowable spirit. Your spirit knows, as well as your spirit allows you to know. See? And so we need to understand, what is our spirit knows? I think that, and I made a comment earlier today in the show, that those 1.5 black men made a decision to come to Washington, D.C. because the spirit knew. Not their pocket, because some of them had to borrow money, some of them had to get stuff together, but their spirit knew that we had to be there, because when that energy came together, that was what? A knowing and knowable spirit that was not defined, that was independent of white conceptualization of what is to be a black man. That's powerful, powerful. And that we have to begin to see the spirit. And Africa teaches us that the spirit, this knowing and knowable spirit, is the energy through which one has an enduring, not a one time, not a sometime, and now maybe, now if I get around to it, it'll happen, but has an enduring relationship to the total perceptible, imponderable universe. All that says in sort of highfalutin language is that there's no place we don't belong. There's no thing we can't do. that we have a total enduring relationship to, if you can perceive it, if you can think it, we belong to it. If you can understand it, you can create it. Africa teaches us these things. And so part of it's not just sort of book learning, it is part of what it is to be a human being. You don't ever have to have a book, even though you should have books. But you don't ever have to have a book to understand that as a human being, you're a rising, living son with a knowing and knowable spirit that is the energy through which you have an enduring relationship. Our relationship to the ancestors is enduring, even though all our education taught us that when you're dead, you're gone. But the fact of the matter is that these ancestral spirits that we are connected to are still here. And they drive us. They whisper to us in the wind. You hear me? They whisper to you in the wind. They speak to you in that first voice that your mama talked about. Well, whatever your first mind is, do that. You start checking yourself. So maybe I should do. You make a mistake. That first mind is the voice of your ancestors. And so we need to understand that, because we built great things based upon that. We have a continuum from ancient Nile Valley civilizations in the first 6 or 7 dynasties. You know, black men and women built great civilizations, built material monuments, not to be ego-tripping and say, I'm going to have a pyramid, but built them because they understood that the material was a manifestation of the spirit. The material is a manifestation of the spirit. So if I build a monument in brick for eternity, I'm saying I'm going to be here for eternity. My spirit cannot be destroyed. And that is the case with us. Our spirit wasn't destroyed. It was redefined. See, the African spirit through our enslavement was not destroyed. Europeans want you to believe that somehow Africa got destroyed and then they reinvented us as slaves and as Negroes, and we sort of up from slavery, and now we sort of, made in America Bobby doll type, Snoopy dog kind of creations. And we think we take pride in that because we are a light Bobby doll as opposed to a dark Bobby doll. And we have these great debates about that kind of foolishness, and not recognizing that our spirit, our African spirit, was never destroyed. It was simply redefined. It was hidden from us. But in this continuum of our spirit, our ancestors built monuments to the spirit. I'd like to point out and give the example that the first great perfect pyramid was built by Khufu. And Khufu passed on something to his son, and his son was named Khafre, and Khafre built the second great pyramid, and then Khafre passed on something to his son. His son's name was Makari, and Makari built the third great pyramid. And so now when we go to Africa and we send back you all postcards, you see this postcard of these 3 pyramids in a row with a couple of Arabs and some camels and a lot of sand, and on the back it says, wish you were here. We see it and don't recognize that what we see in that postcard is a black family project. We see the black family in the projects. See the difference? We conceptualize that when we locate ourselves, we say black folk are from the project. We don't want them project niggas around us. But don't realize that the project, the black family project, was a building project. The black family project was always about building nations. It was about building monuments to the glory of our spirit. And look what Khufu, Khafre, and Makari do. Khufu named his boy Khafre, and Khafre named his son Makari. Khafre is Ka-Ra, the Spirit of God. Here I am naming my son the Spirit of God. My son then in turn names his son Mercury or Makari. Mer-Ka-Ra. Mer is love, Ka is spirit, Ra is God. The love of the Spirit of God. Simple psychological question. If my grandson's name is the love of the Spirit of God, and my son's name is the Spirit of God, who am I? Black man and woman, who are you? You see, our ancestors left it. They wrote it down and said, our baby's going to get lost. I'm going to put it on a brick. I'm going to write it in concrete so that when they get lost, they do what any human being does. When I get frightened, when I get lost, I run back to mama's kitchen table. And when we as scholars got lost and frightened, we went back to the Nile Valley. And right at mama's kitchen table was written on the wall, black man, you are God. You are the Spirit. You are the Spirit. don't you all run out here talking about you all. See, I'm frightened sometimes. I get frightened sometimes because I know and I love my people. Sometimes we gonna run out here, I'm God. And we start talking about God and get shot and stuff. Don't be foolish here. It is high culture and deep thought. Think deeply about this. It's not just that you are God, meaning you are God, but it is in fact that you are the energy. You are the same energy, spirit, power, force that gives life. And that you have an obligation and responsibility to do something with that. And we did. First, 6,000 BC, the building of the Great Pyramids. All these pyramids were not monuments to egos. They were monuments to the manifestation of the glory of the Spirit. In the 17th dynasty, Tutankhamun, Hatshepsut, people that we locate as heroes, but don't locate the heroes, understand what made them great. Understand the psychology of the history maker. And these people built tombs and temples that were centers of intellectual life. These centers were universities. We were the university-going people. We weren't just people hanging out. We were people who understood the importance of what? Pondering deeply about our relationship to each other and to the divine. And then manifesting that answers to that pondering in building of nations. See, we ponder about the relationship to the divine, and then once we understand that relationship, our instincts tells us build great nations. Build nations. We can't just be here in Brooklyn, here in Harlem, out in Oakland, talking about we just inherit this stuff from the white folks, and ain't it so bad? The reason why we do that because you haven't pondered deeply about who you are. And if you understand your being, then you will do something. You will do something, but you first got to understand your being. If you don't understand your being, then you will do anything. You will do anything. The 25th dynasties, the Ramses brothers, I like about the Ramses brothers, there were some serious black men, but they begin to talk about the restoration of the ancient ways. Here's the key here. Every time we get astray, we do Sankofa. Every time we get lost, we say, wait, let's stop the shit. Let's go back and find the right answer and come forward. Every time we get in trouble, we sit down at mama's kitchen table. I have a hard time here in New York back in the day, and I would find me a way to get back to Mississippi, find me a way to get back to Alabama, find me a way to get back to Georgia so that I can regroup with my source. And my source was Big Mama, Ma, Ma Dear, all them old folks who understood it. They were icons. See, they were the icons, the symbols of the source of the egg. Now, we don't do that. We got black folk running around talking about they're homeless. Think deeply about these issues. When did we become so estranged from our spirit that we can look up and say, I can't pay the rent, I get kicked out, I'm homeless, and my solution is to align myself with some white folk to establish a homeless people's union to petition to power to maybe give me some aid to build a house. Black folk never operate that way. When we had, in this city was famous for rent parties. For rent parties, when stuff got bad, I would simply have a rent party and everybody would come with their dime, with their penny, with their nickel. Sometimes we'd have waste parties. And we wanted Big Mama to come to the party. We wanted Big Daddy Kane to come to the party because they were big and fat, and we put the inches around them, they got to pay a little more. It was also a profound sense of balance. We knew they were going to eat more when they got there, and so they should be paying more. So we had this sort of logic that made sense in our system. But we didn't have homelessness. We didn't have homelessness because people were able to collectively say, when your stuff is bad, the collective will come to serve you, to aid you. And when my stuff is bad, you got to come to my rent party. And I wasn't disrespected. Oh, man, he's not doing well. He had a rent party. I came to your rent party because I knew that stuff is bad. Next week, I might have to give a rent party. And so we supported each other in that notion. The ancient kingdoms of Ghana, Mali, Songhai, all examples of us doing something. But don't go away with the doing, oh, we had all this good stuff back in the day. Understand that we could not do these things if we did not understand our spirit, that it was the being African that allowed us to do the great things that African now we've been able to uncover as African scholars. And one could even ponder about how is it that right after our physical enslavement in this country, Black men and women immediately reinvented 3 institutions. Nation building. We immediately, first thing we did was we reestablished the church. Even though the church was forced on us through the Christianization, we Africanized the church. And so the church became one pillar of our thing. The second thing we reestablished was the family. By law, we could not be family. By law, black families were women and their children. And we still have legacies of that even in the welfare system now in terms of what they define as the unit that deserves support. But we established our families so black men and women walk all over this country looking for brothers and sisters. In fact, I always think that's why we call each other brothers and sisters. Because if I saw somebody that I thought was my brother, look enough like him and say, hey brother, hey sister, and then it just caught on. But it's something more essential than that to that as well, is because the familial relationship is a deeper relationship than the contractual relationship. The contractual relationship can come and go based upon the contingencies of my condition. If I ain't got it, I can cut you loose. But I can't cut my mama loose. You can sell me away. I can't cut my brother loose. You see, and so those notions become important because so we got the family being built right after our in quote, emancipation, with the establishment of the church, and the third one was the school. School, family, and church. If nothing else, we cannot build nation unless we have absolute control over the institution called the family, the institution where we give praise and glory to God. It could be a church, temple, mosque, doesn't matter. And the institution where we, what? Reproduce and refine the best of ourselves. That's all education is. Humans invent, not even humans, all animals invented this system called education because instinctually we understood that you must, it is your moral mandate, you must reproduce and refine the best of yourself. Now, how can we reproduce and refine? How can schools reproduce and refine the best of Africa if we in this country believe that to be African is inferior? You know, how do you keep a people controlled if you allow them? This is a better question. How do you dominate a people? How do you control a people if you allow them to have the authority for reproducing and refining the best of themselves? I'm not going to reproduce a slave. I'm not going to reproduce an inferior. I'm going to reproduce the best of myself. I'm going to reproduce Imhotep. I'm going to reproduce Marcus Garvey. I'm going to reproduce Harriet Tubman. I'm going to reproduce Hatshepsut. I'm going to reproduce the best of myself. And the reason why there's so much struggle around this question of Afrocentric education is because they understand that if you have African-centered education and the purpose of education is the reproduction and the refinement of the best of ourselves, then we're going to take that African-centered pedagogy, reach back and get that egg out of Sankofa's mouth and go forward to master technology in the future. That's our mission. Now understand, we're not going to do that because Dr. Noble said we're going to do that. That's our nature. You see, that's our nature. Our nature is once we understand our being, then we must what? We must be more better. Once we understand our being, then we become more better, and the evidence of us being more better is the monuments that we build, and nation is a monument. Nation building is a monument. So we have to begin to look at what happened in terms of this enslavement. You know, almost like 6-7 years after emancipation, black men and women were walking around this country, finding family, worshiping God, and building schools. Almost overnight, Hampton, Howard, Morehouse, Spelman, Talladega, Florida A&M, Morris Brown, all these historical black colleges bloomed in this country. They were nothing more than high schools in actuality, but we said they were colleges. Power is the ability to define reality and to have other people respond to your definition as if it were their own. So while we had the ability only to manage high schools, we said the vision is a university. The vision is a university. The actuality will go to the vision. And the fact of the matter is that we here who can even think and walk and chew bubblegum at the same time are the direct descendants of that inspiration of the historical black college. Even though we might went to other kind of colleges, the fact of the matter is that our ability to think was guaranteed by the protection of the nation building activity called historical black colleges. But what happened with this? What happened, I mean, if that's our nature, if that's our spirit, why are we the way we are? Why are we struggling with this issue? It seems to me that there's something that doesn't fit here, something doesn't match here. And this is where Marimba Ani's work becomes most crucial, because Marimba helps us to see that this notion of the Maafa is the rupture between our being and our doing. That the Maafa cut us off from the natural alignment between being African and doing greatness. The Maafa that Marimba talks about is a great disaster of misfortune and death and destruction beyond human convention and comprehension. Beyond death and destruction, beyond human convention and comprehension. And when I thought about what Marimba was pointing to in her notion of the Maafa, I realized that what made the Maafa, the Maafan acts of death and destruction beyond human convention and comprehension, is that the critical feature of the Maafa is the necessity of denying the validity of African people's humanity. That white supremacy cannot exist unless you deny the validity of African people's humanity. And now, look at your own lived experiences. Everything that you do, all the stuff that affronts us, is really the result of someone denying the validity of our humanity. We can be almost white, and they'll accept that. We can try to be amongst them, and we will accept that. They will accept that, but we never quite get to be human beings. You have to deny the validity of one's humanity. And when you do that, then you can do anything to those people. See, once I define you as not a valid human being, then I can do anything to you. If I have a dog and you are not an animal rights activist, I can shoot my dog in front of you, and you may ask you, well, damn, where you going to bury it? Now you got a problem. Where you going to bury that dead dog? You going to leave it there? You're concerned about it's an inconvenience. But you're not horrified by the fact that I just shot my dog. It's because the dog is not a human. And so by defining African people or challenging the validity of African people's humanity, you can do anything to us. And once we accept that definition, we allow them to do anything to us. You see, and so the Maafa becomes very important. But this destruction is not just something we need to think of. I mean, we need to say, oh, that was bad. This really defines for me our permanent relationship to white people. The Maafa, because until the white people can declare themselves free of this instinct, this nature of death and destruction directed at us, we have no alliances. We cannot do anything with them other than protect ourselves from them. In 1918, in Valdosta, Georgia, a black man was lynched. During that period, you all know that for 100 years in this country, every single day of the year, black men and women were lynched. And they were lynched not as sort of capital punishment. They were lynched as a celebration of the destruction of black life. That's beyond human comprehension. Folk would have picnics and be eating dripping red barbecue sauce, dripping pork ribs, and a black man's body would be dripping red blood burnt on a tree. How can you do that? That's beyond, at least for me, it's beyond my comprehension. I can't imagine eating some barbecue where I see somebody's body burning and mixing of the smell of barbecue cooking and flesh cooking. That's beyond human comprehension and convention. And typically young white boys would demonstrate their manhood by going up to the burning dead carcass and reach inside the body and pull out a man's liver as a sign of strength. That's beyond human comprehension and convention. Sometimes they would mock the butcher man and slice up our livers as if they were slicing up salami or bologna. Beyond human comprehension and convention. They would bash out our eyes and take our eyeballs and put them in little bottles and give them to their girlfriends as love offering. It is beyond comprehension that a woman would accept that as a present, but they did. That's Maafa. We need to understand the deepness, the depth of this destruction, because it's tied to what? The invalidation of our humanity. In 1918, Mary Turner's husband was lynched in that fashion. And when she went, and I want to say Mary Turner because we should invoke her name. We should know that our ancestors had names. They were human beings. They were just like you and I. And Mary Turner's husband was lynched, burnt, destroyed like that. And when she went to the sheriff's department to retrieve her husband's body to bury it, the constable, the sheriff on duty, decided that her attitude was wrong. That the way she approached and the way she requested her husband's body was wrong. And so they proceeded to lynch her for simply asking in pain, asking for her husband's dead body. But the way they lynched her is informative. She was 8 months pregnant. They lynched her by her feet with her head over an open flame. And then they cut open her belly. And as that baby's beautiful black body fell to the ground, they took the boot and crushed its head. That is beyond human comprehension and convention. And you can't do that to people unless you define them as less than human. The legacy we have today is that this system has defined and perpetuates the invalidation of our humanity. When I walk with my gold card, my PhD, and all my good stuff to get something, to buy something, to negotiate a contract for a car, I go through all kinds of stuff because they see this not a human being. They don't see this doctor with all degrees. They see not a human being. And when I accept them to define me that way, I give truth to the lie of my inhumanity. And we do that. When we don't build nation, when we don't say in 5 years we're going to own this building, we give truth to the invalidation of our humanity. Because only humans will build institutions to protect their own image and interest. Let me say that again. Only humans will build institutions that are designed to protect their own image and interest. Where is the institution that protects our image? Where is the institution that protects our interest? We don't even know what our interest is. See, that's how lost we've gotten in terms of the Maafa. The Maafa, the educational system, becomes a continuation of that Maafa. Just as those men took their boot and crushed out the brains of that new baby, these schoolhouses are crushing the brains of our children by giving them an education that's based upon an anti-African epistemology. And we don't understand this. We're going to always be back here 1,000 years from now. We'll be back here having the same conversation because we haven't grappled with this issue. It's a process of de-spiritualization, dehumanization. When Du Bois talked about the dehumanization of African people and talked about the two warring idols and one dark body with its dogged strength keeping him from being pulled asunder, he was talking about the de-spiritualization process. See, you can't have, the Europeans had a dilemma here. It was a management dilemma. How do I destroy these African people but maintain their labor? I can't stay in the same place with these Africans because they're too powerful, but I need their labor. Well, to solve that problem, I simply destroy their culture and keep their labor. I simply destroy their spirit, which is the basis of their culture, and keep their labor. So we've gone through a de-spiritualization process. A de-spiritualization process is not hard to understand. It's not hard to understand it. It is that you de-spiritualize humans the same way you create a sheepdog. Same way. A dog has a nature. Dog likes being a dog. Dog will, in fact, defend mama dog. But the way you make that dog become a sheepdog is that you have to first traumatize it. And you traumatize it by snatching it from its mother at birth. Snatching it from its mother at birth. And then you place the baby dog in the corral of sheep. In fact, you place the baby dog's eye to the eye of a sheep. So the baby dog only sees a sheep. There's no other image that it can even imagine at this early stage in life. All it sees that all that is real is a sheep. Then you take the baby dog after it has been acclimated to believe that all that is real is the sheep, is that you allow the baby dog to suckle at the breast of the sheep. And the baby dog internalizes that its very survival depends upon the nurturance from the sheep. And you allow the baby dog to grow bigger with his eye contact, eye to eye with the sheep, and suckling at the breast of the sheep. And when the baby dog gets to be about a teenage dog, strong dog, going through a natural maturation process of one now to test its abilities, as young people do when they go to adolescence. You enter into the corral of this teenage dog, a weakened, dirty, old, scraggly dog. And the teenage dog's territorial imperative forces it to challenge the old dog. And when it challenges and kills the old dog, you reward it. It then becomes a sheepdog. The moment it destroys the old dog, it becomes a sheepdog. Now that's interesting on the farm. I can understand on the farm, but what happens when black children are taken from their mother's womb? Mother now being culture, and all you see eye to eye, face to face, is images of whiteness. The only reality is whiteness. And then you teach them in these schools that your very survival depends upon you getting on the good side of some white person. Get close to white people and you'll be all right. All right? So you suckle at white dependency. And then you reinforce black people to say, we can't do nothing if it's black folk doing it. I don't want to do nothing, all the old nigger shit. I don't have no part of that. If someone tries something, it is black voice that comes out immediately criticizing it. Haven't picked up a single finger to help, but will sit back in high places and criticize because we are reinforced as sheepdogs. Sheepdogs to challenge our territorial imperative. You a good black man. You belong at this university. You can't hang out with Leonard Jeffries. You can't be over there associated with them. You are good. You're going to get tenure. My territorial imperative says I must attack this man because he's an old, scraggly, dangerous black man. And I get rewarded for it. You see the process? That doesn't happen. It happens in each and every aspect of our lives. You think about it, how you are made into sheepdogs. Or better still, black sheep. How you're made into sheepdogs. We need to understand the process because it's a de-spiritualization process. Just as the farmer took out the dog's nature and made the dog, redefined the dog's nature so that it saw the sheep's interest more important than its own kith and kin, white supremacy attempts to take out, and the Maafa attempts to take out our African nature and make us believe that the white people's image and interest is more sacred and important than our own. So we run off, we make big money as a young Michael Jackson, and the first thing we can do is try to distort the image of blackness that's on our face. You know, because he was made into a sheepdog. He believed that what is all holy, what is most profound is whiteness. And we will defend white people. They're not even in the room. Not even in the room. And we be talking about, and we come to their defense. We raise the question, excuse me, point of order. What about the white folks? You know, we call because we have been trained to be sheepdogs. You see, and we need to understand that because there's some results of that. This is I don't want you to go home with sheepdog thing, because we were around here, black people calling each other sheepdogs now. We'll be insulting you. Hey, sheepdog, don't do that. Understand the process. You know, because we pick up stuff the wrong way sometimes. I don't want to divide. There's nothing divisive here. This is analysis, right? And so don't go out calling people sheepdog, because we'll find any old reason to say that I'm better than you. But that's also being a sheepdog, you see. But the analysis says that there's a process where you are de-spiritualized, where your nature as an African is taken away from you, and your nature is then another nature is put in you to operate and serve someone else's interest. That de-spiritualization process has symptoms. We see it every day, and particularly in psychology. Depression. These are signs of de-spiritualization. Depression, alienation, racial rejection, not want to be black. They're black. Even today, black folks still running around trying to find some way to not be black. We're going to be something else. And something else. We can't be black. Lord can't be no African. You know, don't call me no African. You know, I mean, we African. I might get to African American because Jesse said it was all right. You know, but you know, we do all kinds of strange things. But the fact of the matter is that we have that racial rejection is only important because racial, as a concept, has significance in a racist society. Racial has significance in a racist society. It is not, race is not what defines us. The African spirit defines us. But in a racist society, they try to trick us to think that we need to talk about racial issues. So we run around talking about racial issues and not realize that we haven't got touched with our humanity as African people. Now, but racial rejection becomes part of that. Gender confusion is part of that. Cultural denigration, not wanting to have anything around about African people. Mental illness is symptomatic of de-spiritualization. Drug addiction, alcoholism, ignorance, hopelessness, helplessness, homelessness, all symptomatic of a de-spiritualized people. Apathy, anger, hostility, spousal abuse, black-on-black crime, family dysfunction, all that stuff that we play around with and try to get government grants to go study are simply the result of a de-spiritualized people. And that we can't turn those around by simply talking about let's get some black-white sensitivity groups because we worry about the racial rejection and black kids don't like being black, so we can get them sitting beside white kids, they might feel better. See how crazy we get? Right. Sheepdogs do crazy things, you see, and we get crazy because we don't understand what the problem is. You can have the right answer, a lot of energy, but if you conceptualize the problem right, even though the answer is right to that problem, you still got a wrong answer. Right. So you have to begin to understand it's being clear on the problem that's important. I help my students try to understand this by pointing out to them that if we have this nature, if we are African people, then how do you conceptualize that to see that this nature is important? I think it's in our culture. Right. This African culture is not just clothes, not song and dance, not a list of our heroes and heroines. All that's important, all that's sort of the manifestation of culture. But culture also has this invisible part. Culture is a deep structure. There's a level of culture that has to do with people's ontological, cosmological, axiological perceptions. Now all that's just sort of big words, but please understand that ontology simply means the understanding of the nature of reality. Cosmology has to do with the structure of relationships. Axiology has to do with the primary characteristics of relationships. All those have to do with what? With doing. How do you do what you do? All right. It is in the culture. I try to posit it. Culture is the process which gives people a general design for living and patterns for interpreting reality. But culture is the humans as water is the fish. Think about it. Think deeply. Culture is the humans as water is the fish. And fish know that water is everything. Water is critical. Water is pervasive. Water is invisible. But water most profoundly is essential to their existence. Take a fish out of water, fish get problems. Take the fish out of water, fish get problems. The eyes start bucking up, the fins start flapping, the lips start jumping around, the tails start crawling up, they look real strange. Because they can't exist outside of the water. Humans can't exist outside of culture. So you're either in your authentic culture, which is African, or you're in some other culture, which could be an adopted culture, could be an adaptation of a culture, it could be an aberrant culture. Right. And that when we borrow someone else's culture, we borrow their insanity as well. Right. We borrow their genius, but we also borrow their insanity. Right. And depending upon who we borrowing from, the balance of genius and insanity may not be to our advantage. Right. So we got to look at these things. Fish and water. Fish know that water is essential. And you probably don't hear fish on I'm in water, I'm in hot water, the water's cold, the water's muddy, there's an oil spill. Fish don't do that kind of analysis, but they know if you change the nature of the water, they got to acclimate, they got to change. Right. And we know from being good South Carolina, North Carolina people, that if you take freshwater fish and you put them in salt water, they got a problem. Or more aligned to us because salt water is more akin to our nature. You take saltwater fish and put them in freshwater, saltwater fish got to change. Saltwater fish have a nature. They have a spirit. The saltwater fish have color. You all know that, right? Freshwater fish aren't as pretty as saltwater fish. Fresh saltwater fish are big fish. They got color. Their fins are all long, sometimes curly, maybe crinkly, maybe even called nappy. The saltwater fish swim with a certain kind of rhythm. Saltwater fish will come together like this, and they look like they're kissing. And saltwater fish men will be saying, "Baby, you so fine, God must have been showing off when he made you." Now, knowing that, understanding saltwater fish psychology, would think that the saltwater fish was simply rapping, but he wasn't. It is the nature of the saltwater fish to give high regard and deep respect to his compliment. It doesn't call a bitch, hoe, skank. It is his nature to come to and say, "You so fine. Whatever I say to you must be a high regard, deep respect." So saltwater fish know that. Saltwater fish love kissing each other. Saltwater fish men know that when they look down the stream, they can see the way the saltwater fish woman's fin moves, that it must be a saltwater fish, that you can't mistake that. Saltwater fish love to live in schools. They hang out in schools. These are all the nature of the saltwater fish. But you take the saltwater fish and put them in the freshwater, saltwater fish got a problem. It either changes or it dies. But as a psychologist, all I can conclude is the saltwater fish in freshwater engages in strange behavior. That's a diagnostic category. Strange behavior. Saltwater fish begin to say things like, "I don't like looking like a saltwater fish." Saltwater fish begins to say things like, "I think I'm going to get a job and maybe buy me some blue contact lenses." Saltwater fish says, "I need me some Jerry Curl straightening fin cream." Saltwater fish says, "I got to change the color. All this color on these fins is just it's too harsh on my eyes. I need to get me some bleaching scale cream." Saltwater fish says, I don't like saltwater fish food. It's too rich. It doesn't. My system doesn't allow me to digest it properly. Saltwater fish start saying things like, "Well, I want to live in a freshwater fish neighborhood. I want to move to the area where there's not so much saline in the water." Saltwater fish start talking about the problem in the saltwater community is that there's too many saltwater fish teenage pregnancy. Saltwater fish men begin to make really strange kinds of behavior. They say things like, "I think the freshwater fish women are prettier than saltwater fish women." Saltwater fish men begin to say things like, "Well, freshwater fish women seem to be able to satisfy my needs better. Freshwater fish women can have a conversation at an intellectual level that's high and gives me an opportunity to challenge my thinking that saltwater fish women can't do." Saltwater fish men begin to say things like, "Well, the freshwater fish women don't hassle me about everything. I mean, these saltwater fish women are always hassling me." Saltwater fish men begin to say, "Well, these freshwater fish women are sexually more liberated. They can respond to my inner sexual desires better. They are freaky." This is strange behavior. Saltwater fish women you hear some strange stuff. Saltwater fish women begin to say, "These saltwater fish men's are shiftless. They violent. They no account." You hear these saltwater fish women start talking to the guppies saying, "You are no good, just like your saltwater fish daddy. You a dog fish." Saltwater fish women start talking about to the little girl guppies, "You can't trust no saltwater fish man. You better go for yourself, girlfriend. You better ask him, what has he done for you lately?" They begin to have this conversation in the saltwater. Fish are having this conversation in the fresh water that sounds strange to me. The middle class saltwater fish that have been around for a while start attacking other saltwater fish. They say they need to pick themselves up by their gill straps. I don't understand. These other saltwater fish are an embarrassment. They need to get off of welfare. It's an embarrassment to me. They need to stop blaming freshwater supremacy. They need to have individual assertiveness training. These saltwater fish don't need no affirmative action program. We are now on a level playing pond. The saltwater fish middle class begin to make analysis don't make sense. Middle class saltwater fish begin to take pride in not being saltwater fish. They challenge you and demand, "You have to see me as a fish. I'm simply a fish. I'm not saltwater fish. I'm not freshwater fish. I'm just a fish." saltwater fish begin to say things like, to be referred as a saltwater fish is a limitation on me. I don't want to be seen as a saltwater fish actor. I'm simply an actor. I don't want to be seen as a saltwater fish psychologist. I'm simply a psychologist. Why can't you see me simply as what I do? Saltwater fish in the barbershop or in the fin shop begin to say, wait a minute, something strange here. It seems to me that the freshwater fish, the saltwater fish are the first to get, the last to get hired and the first to get fired. What you talking about fairness? Saltwater fish begin to say, wait a minute, more saltwater fish males go to freshwater fish prisons than go to freshwater fish college. I thought you said there was something fair here. Saltwater fish begin to say, wait a minute, I wonder what's going on with this IQ test thing. Wonders why the saltwater fish don't do so well on the freshwater fish IQ test. Saltwater fish teachers begin to say, wait a minute, I know why they don't do well. They don't do well because these saltwater fish teachers begin to blame poor educational performance on the saltwater fish environment and not on the educational system. They say these fish can't learn because they come from saltwater fish projects. These fish can't learn because their saltwater mamas on welfare. These saltwater guppies can't learn because the saltwater fish daddy's in jail. The saltwater grandmamas on crack cocaine. Too many saltwater fish guppies having guppies don't allow me to teach them. They have no role models in the freshwater fish success. What we need to do is to provide them with saltwater fish mentors. We need to have a mentoring program. Saltwater fish said we need to have a saltwater fish civil rights movement. Maybe we can protest and get some integration into the cities. Saltwater fish said, wait a minute. Every time a saltwater fish gets elected to the freshwater fish mayorship, everything is going to hell. This community, the pond is laden with crime, there's unemployment, there's infrastructure decay, there's no economic base, and then they expect the saltwater fish mayor to do what the freshwater fish, to undo what the freshwater fish created. This is strange behavior. This is strange behavior. And it's simply because we are superior to saltwater fish, we know automatically. All you have to do to help these saltwater fish is to put some salt in the water. That the problem for the saltwater fish was not all those illusions of disability. You hear me? The problem for the saltwater fish was not the illusions of disability. The problem for the saltwater fish is that the culture in which was essential to its very existence was anti its survival. And that you've got to put salt in the water to make that water conducive to its survival. And so if we thought there was some similarity between that cute little story and this strange behavior in what Africans do here, then we got the answer. We can Africanize time and space. You hear me? We can Africanize time and space. Time and space are neutral. It is the spirit of the occupier of the time and the space that defines it as being aligned to its culture. Now, if we recognize the physics of that, see, deep thought here, think about it. Time and space is neutral. It is the agent that occupies time and occupies space that determines its cultural alignment. So this community doesn't have to be anything but what the people who occupy it defined it as. That's a heavy burden. Because when I walk down these streets, it's not a place I think I would want to live in. Now, when I walk down the streets of Oakland where I do live, I say the same thing. And the reason why our communities are in the condition that they're in is because of the Maafa and the white supremacy. The reason why they remain so is because we who are the occupiers are doing the service of white supremacy and not the service of our African spirit. See, they created it, but we're continuing it. And we can only change it if in fact we get in touch with, we understand our African nature. Africa teaches us that the life process itself is a progression through stages of spiritual evolution and cultural maturation. Hold on to both those things, spiritual evolution and cultural maturation. What do we do in our everyday lived experiences that reinforces and allows for our young people to go through an appreciation and internalization of cultural maturation? When do we take charge of the process of cultural maturation? When do we sit down as elders and think through, these are the experiences that young children must go through in order to be a mature African human being? What are the experiences that young girls must go through as part of the cultural maturation that allows us to say, you are now a woman? What are the experiences that young boys must go through that allows us to say that you are now a young man? We haven't done that. We haven't done the basic work of human beings. We are so much reacting to white folks that their agenda becomes, our agenda becomes the reaction to their agenda. But what if they did not exist? What if they did not exist? What would we do? See, our nature tells us what to do. We have to begin to recognize that we need to invent and create procedures, experiences, that in the digesting of the experience, in the eating of the food of our culture, our children grow up right.
All right.
But we don't do that. We still are reacting to white people. We need to recognize that the life process is a spiritual evolution. What kinds of things do we do? The doing of it. Remember the three laws? The law of undoing, that what we do in this generation becomes the history of the next generation. The next generation for us is our children. What do we do with our children that becomes their history?
All right.
What do we do with their children? Leonard made the point that my wife and I invented, having gone to the Nile Valley as young people. We decided then that when our children, since our name is Nobles, we do a lot with symbolism, but since our name is Nobles, and there's a place in the Nile Valley called the Valley of the Nobles, that part of our children's understanding of what it is to be African, one small part of it is that as nobles, they must go back to the Valley of the Nobles to get our name, put it on a cartouche, and bring it back to award to their mother and father. Now, our children grew up with that as the goal of their high school graduation. So all their lives, they said, well, I'll be glad when I go, because they would come back with the stories. The older children come back with the stories about what they did by themselves, hanging out with Asa Hilliard, or hanging out with Dr. Ben, and being able to sit in Egypt, eating watermelon with Dr. Ben. Listen to this old sage talk about things, and coming back with their name Nobles, understanding that that's the nature. That's just a ritual. See, that's something we invented. We can invent, here's my point, we can invent practice that in the doing of it, we transform our children. That they must do it, and in doing of it, they transform. This society has done it already for us. They have our children doing stuff that is deviant, and they're becoming transformed to become deviants. And then we end up having to say, we got to call the cops. We need more police in our community because our own children are terrorizing us. The key here is the doing. We can invent doing things. In the Yoruba tradition, the Yoruba greet each other by saying, Alafia, She Alafia Ni. It means, is your total being at perfect peace? And old people can only say that to young people. Because of what? The rule of cultural maturation and spiritual evolution. I'm older than you, so I can query about, I can ask about your total existence. If I'm younger than you, and I ask you about your total existence being at peace, if it wasn't, I don't have the cultural maturation to do something about it anyway. So it says the responsibility of eldership is to help in the establishment of total and perfect peace in the young. How many of us old folk do that? I work in these high schools in Oakland, and I watch these black teachers walk around the high school. They don't even speak to the children. They're frightened by the children because they have been contaminated, they have been de-spiritualized, they have become sheepdogs, and seeing these children as the enemy. Some of us even see our own blood children, the children that came through our sacred womb, as our enemies. See how sheepdogish we can get? Because we don't understand the spirit? And the Yoruba says that there's a diagnosis in the greeting. If I ask you, how are you? Do you have total and perfect peace? Then that gives you an opportunity to check yourself, to see what is not in alignment. What do I need to do to get total and perfect peace? If I am in total and perfect peace, I say Modupwe. Modupwe is the Yoruba for not, yeah, I get it together, I'm in charge, I'm on it, but it says, I give thanks to God for having total and perfect peace. Just as Farrakhan said, give thanks to God, I'm just the instrument here. That what I achieved, the greatness I achieved, I give thanks to the Spirit that did it. The Spirit did it, not me that did it. You see? And so even now, as we talk about going to Africa and studying African traditions, it's studying them because there's prescription there. There's prescription that can help us understand our way. If you can't say Modupwe, because things are not at total and perfect peace, then the response in Yoruba is Da-da-ni. Da-da-ni means I exist. They say, no, I'm just here. That's not what we say. We say Da-da-ni, meaning I exist, because if I exist, I am what? I am a living, rising sun, worthy of perpetual veneration. Because I be, I deserve your veneration. Because I be, I deserve your high regard and deep respect. Now, what if we just simply ingrain that in our young boys and girls from birth? That when you see another African person, because they be, because you don't know nothing about them, but because they exist, they are deserving of your high regard and deep respect. That's what the old folks used to do. There's nothing new here. Your grandmama taught you that. They said when an old person comes in the house, you respect them. You get them a glass of water, you get up out your chair, you make sure they're taken care of, because they are deserving of perpetual veneration. We've lost our way. And all we have to do is to reclaim it in this generation, make it the history of the next generation, and it becomes the new tradition of a people. It is the spirit that is important here. Let me try to come to a conclusion with the knowledge in my mind that I got some stuff that I have to skip over quickly. Spiritness, the egg, the essence that is in the egg has to be conceptualized properly. Too often we get confused about African spiritualism, African spirituality, this African spirit, and we do all kinds of stuff with it. But I think that we need to recognize that spirit is energy. It is force, it is power. It's like the electricity. These lights here are manifest, but what they manifest is this invisible electricity that you can't see. And our spirit is the electricity, but it should be manifest so you can see the light. That's why the gospel people say, let your little light shine. I'm going to let it shine. That symbolism is ancient. That we always believe in enlightenment as evidence of the Spirit. Enlightenment, the illumination of the Spirit. I've offered to my fellow black psychologists that we probably should stop calling ourselves psychologists, because the term has become contaminated and it limits me. I can't even think through a problem as a psychologist. And I suggest going back to the Nile Valley, that our ancients taught us that the Saku, what Naim Akbar talks about in some of his work, that the Saku means an understanding, the illuminator, the eye, the soul of being. It is that which inspires. Saku is that which inspires. It's the energy, the spirit, the force, the power. And in the Meadow Netches, Sheti means a process of going deeply into a subject, to study it profoundly, to search for its deeper meaning, and to penetrate it deeply. So possibly we should call ourselves Shaku Shetists and not black psychologists. We should see ourselves as those people who are responsible for the deep and profound study, mastery, and understanding of the process of human illumination. That's a Shaku Shetist. A black psychologist studies behavior like you study the workings of a rat in a maze. One gives you some information, but it is limited. Other has no limitations. You see, so you see what I'm suggesting? Is that as we reclaim the African way, we have to begin to deal with African concepts that give us greater latitude for understanding the phenomena. Mentor The saltwater fish said we need to have some mentors for our little saltwater guppies so they can learn how to survive in the fresh water. We need to analyze that. Mentor was a human being in Greek mythology. And he was a person that April, in Greek mythology, asked to protect his family and children while April went off to the Trojan Wars to plunder, rape, and destroy the Trojan people. Now, in this country, if I did that, I would be an accomplice to criminal assault. Right. So why is mentor somebody we hold up with high regard? Right. Mentor is somebody who allowed another body to do evil. So when we tell our children we want them to have mentors, we are telling them, we are giving them the psychological meaning of the concept that they internalize. That's dangerous. That's dangerous. And maybe because we don't understand that, it just resonates and we think our kids are just running wild, but it's because we didn't call ourselves properly. Your name is your nature. The concept has resonant energy. Words have resonant energy. So when I associate my children with a mentor, maybe I am internalizing in them the ability to accept participation in death and destruction. Just by a word. Just by a word. It's worth thinking about. It may be just the ramblings of a rapidly getting older shaku shetist, but think about it. I suggest that we look at Africa. In Africa, in East Africa, the Amhara people talk about that in every community, the people define a role of the adult that's called the Jegna, Jegna, the Jegna. And the Jegna's sole and singular responsibility is to protect the children, to protect the culture, and to protect the land. Think about it. Jegna. And the requirement, the prerequisite for a Jegna is someone who is older and has been tested in battle. Tested, has defended the community in battle. Now maybe we should think about this right now. We could reclaim that. We could begin talking about we need to have Jegnas in our community. Those men and women who are identified as having the high qualities of being able to defend our community uncompromisingly, will not sell out, will defend the community, but particularly protect our children, our culture, and our land. Jegnas. Maybe we should have Jegnas, not mentors. And so we begin to talk about a new resonance. You see what I'm saying? A new energy force. If we begin to have Jegna programs, and I grow up believing that I want to aspire to become a Jegna. See the psychology here? If young men and women grew up saying, I want to be a Jegna, meaning it is my life's ambition to be what? A protector of the culture, a defender of children, and a protector of our place, our space, our land. We'd have a different kind of reality. Just by changing and reclaiming, that's the Sankofa, going back and reclaiming the essence and applying it to go forward. That's the kind of issue that the spirit, an understanding of spiritness allows us to do. See, spiritness, as distinct from spirituality, is being a spirit. The concept, spiritness, not spirituality. Spiritness pertains to the condition of being a spirit, whereas spirituality pertains to having the quality of spiritual. So if I can sing the gospel, I'm being spiritual. But I can sing the gospel and be a devil. You see? Because having the quality of something can come and go. But if it's your essential nature, that's a more profound concept. And so I want to propose that we start talking about or using the term spiritness as opposed to spirituality or spiritual. Because spiritual will sometimes lead us to religion, sometimes a religious celebration. All that's good, but we need to have a concept that represents that I am a spirit and not that I get spiritual on Sunday. but I am a spirit. And this spiritness really does some interesting things. Spiritness, being a spirit, allows you to experience the urge and the desire for what is excellent and good. See, ask yourself some fundamental questions. Why do Africans have this urge for the good stuff? We get played off in the capitalist exploitative society based upon our spiritness, because we want top shelf liquor, we want the best car, we want the fine clothes, and so the people exploit us. But what's the drive for that? The drive for that is the same drive that allowed us to build the pyramids. It is the drive for the desire for excellence. And so whatever is defined as excellence, we want. There's no problem with that. The problem is other people are defining what is excellent. You see, there's the problem. Other people define what is excellence. Spiritness also makes for ethical character and conduct. We are ethical people by nature. We are ethical people by nature. But when we get trained as sheepdogs, or we are saltwater fish in fresh water, we lose connection to our ethical character. We are our ancestors were the first people who said to be human, one must have virtue, not just be alive. And that to be human, one must stand on the virtues of Ma'at. Truth, justice, righteousness, harmony, balance, propriety, and order. That's what makes you human. Not just that you were born, but that you in fact have character. The Yoruba says, Iwa Pele, that a good human being has a gentle character. A gentle character. That no matter how powerful you get, no matter how learned you are, no matter how strong you are, your character is always gentle, because who you relate to are objects of perpetual veneration. That I can't treat you harshly if I believe you to be a rising sun that needs to be glorified. I can't destroy you. So my character has to be gentle in relationship to other folk. Look at that in terms of what it would do for male-female relationships. Look at that what it would do for brother-brother relationships, sister-sister relationships. You see, the spiritness does something. This is not just sort of academic conversation or masturbation. This is prescription that allows us to see our way out of this by going into ourselves. The spirit is also has a desire for order and for the beautiful. Look at all the old folk sayings. Old folk sayings about God don't like ugly. But they weren't talking about your physical features. They were talking about your conduct whenever that was made. Because the spiritness likes order, likes desire. We got these people talking about, kids can learn by throwing them in a room, put a lot of stuff around, and let them fumble around and sort of learn by exploration. Our children don't learn that way. So we got to understand that we're different. We're not like them. They don't even learn that way. That's just a trick. They want us to believe that that's how learning goes. But the fact of the matter is that we learn by order. Order. That's what Ma'at is about. There is a divinely governed universe. It's not random, not accidental, not mismatch. There's a divinely governed universe that has order. And that we thrive on order. And so we look at our community and going helter-skelter, all people doing anything, everything. That's a sign that we've been de-spiritualized. That we can't correct that by petitioning to the people in power. We correct that by transforming and transcending our spirit so that when we step into time and space are obedient to us. See how powerful you are? Time and space will obey you. Time and space will obey you when you step into it, but you got to bring something to the table. You got to bring something to the table. The reason why time and space don't obey us now is because we are empty. We've been de-spiritualized. Once we realign ourselves with our spirit, literally time and space will obey you. All right. Time and space will obey you to the point that you can go back in time to have a conversation with Malcolm as a living being. Now, you may think I'm tripping on you now, but I want to plant that for you, and you think about it. Think about it. The spiritness also is the emotional. Remember I said I want you to think seriously about words? Words are very important. Words are very important. Emotional means the cause to move. Emotional is emote, to cause to move. We think about emotional as I'm feeling a certain way. I get so emotional, I'm so upset, I can't figure out something. But emotional doesn't mean that. Emotional means the cause to move. And the emotional sense of divine agency is a character of African spiritness. Let me say that again. The emotional sense of divine agency, that there is a divine agency. There's a cause for this. The emotional sense of divine agency means that once you comprehend the divine agency that is in you, it causes you to move. That's what causes you to shout in church. That's what causes you to shout in church. That what causes you to get excited about something. When you see a brother on a football field doing something outstanding, and brothers jump up and do hurrah, or you see sisters dancing, and you get all that emotionality is not feeling, it is physics. You see, it's not feeling, it is physics. It is the law that causes you to move. Music, drums are instruments of divine agency. When Africans start playing drums, or you go to a party and the music starts getting, back in the day when we had parties that were parties, and the music starts to cause you to move. That's the emotional stuff. Right. It causes you to move, but the reason for that is that the music is obedient to the divinely governed nature. It's law-abiding. Right. It's law-abiding. Music, sound is law-abiding. Sight is law-abiding. Those are natural phenomena. Sight and sound are energy in physics. Sight and sound are energy. They're the same thing as our spirit. And so we got to understand those, because we manage those. Then we recognize that when I get emotional, when I am intense, when I am forceful, it is not that I'm angry, because you see these white psychologists put the wrong labels on this stuff. It is that I am what? A container and an instrument of God. And so when my container begins to shine, like this silver thing here begins to glow, is because I am what? Illuminated. White folks say, you getting angry. I'm not angry. Right. I'm forceful. I'm not angry. I am illuminated. It is the spirit. We have to, I'm really struggling with this, because I really feel passionately about this. We have to struggle with really a complete comprehension of the physics of African spirit. Right. The physics of it. It is law-abiding. Right. That you can use that energy just as you can make light shine out of a bulb and a train move down a track. By understanding the laws of physics, we can do the same thing in terms of changing our condition as human beings. The spiritness is the magnetic, again, physics again, magnetic pull away from mere animal and physical existence. See, physical stuff is pleasurable. Sex is wonderful. But that sex is never as good as when the physical act transforms to a spiritual connection. And that's what spiritness does. Spiritness is a magnetic pull away from animal, physical existence toward a more higher, nobler, better, gentler, excellent Godness in us. When men and women really connect, it is at the spiritual level. At the physical level, that's just feeling good for a minute. Right. But at the spiritual level, it is that enduring pondering of the universal laws of God. It is the spiritness that I think is important, because it allows us as psychologists now to see what the role of the healer is. I think that we are healers. We're not therapists. We're not practitioners. We're healers. And as healers in the African sense, the healer participates in the repairing, the reparation of the spiritual web of reaffirming our cultural soul. Everything has to start there. See, reparations is not just about getting out 40 acres and a mule. We certainly should get that with interest. But reparations is really the repairing of our spiritual womb. Repairing the spiritual womb. And if we don't repair that, then they could give us the 40 acres and a mule. They can give us with interest, and we would give it back to them in that proverbial 7 days that our money runs through our community. So it's the repairing of the spiritual womb that the healer must engage in. The role of the healer is to guide, to develop our community's ability to experience and to tap into the extraordinary, special, divine that is within us. See, there's an extraordinary, a special, a divine something, substance